Oliver Hahn had a sister with whom he shared an exceptionally close bond. They were so inseparable that they would sleep in the same bed and even share ice cream. When I suggested they should keep some distance, Oliver impatiently retorted, "If anything inappropriate were going to happen, it would have by now. Why can't you trust us?" I shrugged it off and turned my attention to finding myself a new male best friend. Oliver had spent another night out with Simona Jiang, but I kept my composure. He returned around noon, bringing dim sum from Hengfu restaurant. With a rare explanation, he said, "We had a reunion and drank a lot, so we ended up at a gaming hotel, but I slept on the floor this time, not in the same bed." He emphasized this as we had previously had a massive argument over the issue, where I accused him of being inconsiderate for a married man, and confronted Simona directly. Simona, who grew up in the same neighborhood with Oliver and his friends, had a carefree personality that often led her to behave in ways that disregarded boundaries. I had seen her sit on their laps without hesitation, joke around, and even drink from the same glass. At first, Oliver explained her behavior patiently, but eventually he lost his temper and snapped, "If something were going to happen, it would have already. You wouldn't have even married me," before storming out. His friends also tried to convince me, "Simona has always been like that. Oliver sees her as a little sister." But a 25-year-old is hardly a child. Frustrated, I warned Oliver that if he didn't set boundaries, we would have to divorce. He did start keeping his distance from Simona, but she responded by making sarcastic remarks in public. "Sis, see, I'm not sitting next to Ollie, right? Ollie, you better not join us for the next round lest Sis gets mad." Her remarks, always made in my presence, created an uncomfortable atmosphere. Eventually, I was seen as petty, jealous, and unreasonable, which strained my relationship with Oliver. As I looked at the takeaway box in Oliver's hand, my favorite food no longer held any appeal. Sensing my indifference, Oliver tried to hug me and suggested, "Honey, didn't you want to watch that movie? Let's go together today. I'm not going to the office." This was a film I had been eager to see, but Oliver had initially declined my invitation, claiming he was busy. However, I later saw Simona flaunting 2 tickets on her social media. Though she didn't reveal who accompanied her, the hand in the photo, with its distinct knuckles and a wedding ring, was unmistakably Oliver's. A faint scent of pear blossom on Oliver confirmed my suspicions, and I coldly declined his offer. No need. I then continued packing my bags. "Rita!" Oliver called out with a hint of anger, grabbing my hand to stop me. "Are you playing this game again? I've told you, nothing happened between Simona and me." "I know," I replied calmly, pulling my hand away. "You two are just siblings." My words seemed to choke him, and he let go, frowning. "Then what's your problem now?" "I'm going on a business trip," I said simply. Oliver's face darkened as he scrutinized me, searching for any signs of deception, but found none. My reaction was calm because I no longer cared who he watched movies with, who he spent nights out with, or who he dated. It didn't matter anymore. Seeing that I wasn't angry, Oliver grew even more frustrated. He seemed convinced I was upset and determined to make amends. He pulled out his phone, frantically searching for movie tickets. I watched him, unable to suppress a small reminder. That movie's already off the screens. His fingers froze mid-search, and I saw a flurry of emotions cross his face. The food on the table grew cold as I packed the last item in my suitcase and closed it. After that day, Oliver suddenly became unusually attentive. While I was away on my business trip, he constantly checked in, asking about my return. On the day I arrived back, I spotted his car at the airport, a black Bugatti parked by the roadside. He hurried out to greet me and took my suitcase, but when we reached the car, I noticed Simona in the passenger seat, lounging with her legs up and resting her hand on the window. She grinned at me. "Sis, I'm just hitching a ride. I'll let you have the front seat in a bit." Yet she made no move to vacate the seat. Oliver, after stowing my luggage, noticed my hesitation and uncomfortably explained, "She was nearby, so I offered her a ride. She gets car sick, so I let her sit in the front for now." I had previously complained about Simona always taking the front seat on our trips, but before I could respond, Simona interjected, "Thank goodness Ollie was nearby today. If he hadn't been, I'd be stranded. If you don't believe me, check the chat logs in the group." The group she mentioned consisted of their childhood friends, a circle I was not part of. Of course, if Ollie had left me stranded, I would have tattled to our godparents, Simona added, lightly punching Oliver in the chest before pulling back nervously. Sis, I'm just used to this. No other intentions. Since my confrontation with Oliver, Simona had toned down her touchy-feely behavior, but quickly returned to staying out late and having private outings with him. I could sense the subtle challenge in her eyes, but I was too exhausted to care. When Oliver finally asked her to move to the back, I waved it off and opened the back door. It doesn't matter. I have a friend who's also heading our way. I'll sit in the back with him. A friend? Where? Oliver asked, bewildered as a voice called my name. Turning around, I was met with the sight of a tall, handsome man with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, dragging a suitcase towards me. As he reached me, he complained, "Rita, you left me behind. I just turned to get my suitcase and you were gone." He then clung to my arm, whining pitifully. "I don't know anyone here. You have to take care of me." This unexpected scene stunned both Oliver and Simona. Oliver quickly recovered, grabbing my arm. "This is the friend you mentioned?" His voice was laced with displeasure as he glared at the man. "Yes, I'm Rita's good friend Kevin." Kevin cheerfully introduced himself, shaking Oliver's hand and tossing his luggage in the trunk before settling in the back seat. "Rita, hop in," he called out. I got into the car but was stopped by Oliver. "Honey, it's not appropriate for men and women to sit together like that, right?" His teeth almost audibly ground together. Puzzled, I replied, "Just friends." I glanced at Simona, who was still comfortably seated in the front. Oliver was momentarily speechless. Kevin chatted with me the entire drive, but the front seat was unusually quiet. It wasn't that Simona didn't try to talk. Her lively personality always kept her chattering, but Oliver remained indifferent to her attempts. A 30-minute drive was shortened to 15. After dropping off Simona and Kevin, Oliver opened the front passenger door for me. "Sit in the front." "I'm fine in the back," I calmly refused, closing my eyes to rest. The sound of Oliver closing the door was louder and heavier than before. Oliver returned home with a dark expression. After changing my shoes, I found him in the living room smoking. The cigarette's scarlet glow highlighted the shadows on his face. "What's your relationship with that guy?" he asked, taking a deep drag before stubbing out the cigarette, his gaze intense. "Just a friend," I answered calmly. "A friend? A man over 6 feet tall is your friend? Rita, you went on this business trip with him, didn't you? Several days together with that man?" His anger escalated and he kicked the suitcase. Equally furious, I opened it and snapped, "Business partners can be male or female. He's got a great personality and we get along." "What's wrong with being friends?" "There's a big problem. He's a man. How can a man be just a friend?" he retorted. "Why not? You can have a female sister, but I can't have a male friend?" My words left him speechless. I had never seen so many conflicting emotions on Oliver's face. Shock, frustration, and resentment. Finally, through gritted teeth, he spat out, "Simona is different. We grew up together. If anything were going to happen, it would have." "Kevin and I are different too. Can't we trust each other?" I interrupted firmly. Oliver was at a loss. For the next few days, we barely spoke to each other. A few uneventful days later, we were invited to dinner by his parents. They noticed the tension between us and subtly hinted to Oliver, "Ollie, Rita moved far from home to be with you. You need to treat her well." Oliver and I were college classmates. I was an only child, and the plan had been for me to return to my hometown after graduation to start my career. But for Oliver, I stayed here. Hearing his parents, Oliver's expression softened. As we were leaving, he took my hand. "Rita, Before he could finish, someone threw an arm around his neck. "Ollie, you're finally back. Let's hang out." It was Simona, clinging shamelessly to Oliver. This time, however, Oliver didn't smile back as usual. Instead, he removed her hand, glancing nervously at me. Simona noticed too and exaggeratedly stepped back. "Oh, it's Sis," she said, deliberately leaning into the group of people who had followed us. "Oliver, you didn't even show up in the group chat. If Simona hadn't seen you, we would have missed you." "Yeah, everyone's here, let's hang out," the group jeered. Oliver's face showed he was tempted, but unlike before, he didn't immediately agree. Instead, he looked to me for approval. The group noticed this too. Although married, I remained somewhat distant from them. I wasn't part of their circle, and Simona's presence made them uncomfortable whenever I was around. "How about you join us?" Oliver tentatively suggested. I sensed the tension in the air. Simona's reaction was the most telling. She pouted and sent signals to the others with her eyes. They all awaited my answer, hoping I wouldn't go yet hoping I'd let Oliver go. As they wished, I withdrew my hand from Oliver's and calmly said, "I'll take a taxi home." Silence fell, and the atmosphere grew awkward. After a while, Oliver hesitated before promising, "I'll come back early." He looked relieved yet guilty. I just smiled and walked out of the courtyard. As I left, someone muttered, "Did Sis have a change of heart? Not jealous of Simona anymore, letting Oliver hang out with us?" At 11 o'clock that night, Oliver still hadn't returned. I didn't care. I had just made plans with Kevin, and along with some other friends, we went to the most vibrant bar in town. The pounding music and flashing lights offered a reckless escape. We chose a spacious booth and quickly immersed ourselves in the fun. After a few drinks, someone pointed excitedly towards a nearby table. "Whoa, that looks wild over there." We all turned to look, and I recognized familiar faces. Oliver's childhood friends were gathered around a table piled high with bottles. Oliver was in the center, looking down at his phone. Soon, Simona grabbed the phone from him and straddled his lap, waving a bottle of alcohol. Everyone cheered as if they were accustomed to this behavior. Someone nearby mentioned, "Looks like they're playing a drinking game. This girl is wild." She was just dared to take off her bra, and she did it without a second thought, hanging it around the guy next to her. Even a fearless man wouldn't dare do that. I've seen guys ride girls, but never 7 guys with one girl. Everyone laughed, but I wasn't amused. I saw Oliver put down his phone and, amidst the cheers, allow Simona to bend down with alcohol in her mouth, preparing to kiss him. But she didn't get the chance because I walked over and slapped her. The scene turned chaotic. Oliver's friends tried to calm things down, claiming it was just a joke. Simona looked pitiful and said it was all in fun. But I, expressionless, threw her bra, still hanging on another man, in her face and turned to leave. "If you like playing, wait until Oliver and I divorce, then you can play all you want," I said as I walked away. I meant it. I was truly exhausted, but Oliver didn't agree. He chased me back home. "Honey, we were really just playing a game. Simona always messes around with us. We don't even think of her as a woman. Honey, you just lost your temper too. At worst, I promise I won't mess around with them again. Rita, I didn't even say anything about you coming to the bar with a group of guys." The more he tried to appease me, the more impatient he became. Finally, he yelled at me. By then, I had already packed my bags. I had a lot of things. I couldn't pack everything at once, but I didn't want to stay with him another second. "Move," I said coldly, my voice unexpectedly calm. Oliver was taken aback by my demeanor. His tall figure stiffened, his face flushed with alcohol, and he gritted his teeth. "Do you have to be so serious about this? Oliver, can you accept me sitting on Kevin's lap like that?" I asked. Oliver froze. I sneered, stepping closer. "You can't. You got angry just seeing us sitting together in the back seat during a business trip, so why do you expect me to turn a blind eye?" "That's different," Oliver blurted out. "I'm a man. You're a woman. When I go out, no one takes advantage of me." Hearing Oliver's words, I felt shattered all over again. It was as if I was meeting this person for the first time. My body trembled involuntarily, and I said, in disbelief, "So, you knew all along. You knew Simona's behavior was wrong, it was wanton, it was disgusting, but because she's a woman, you enjoy it. You take pride in taking advantage of her." Oliver was speechless, his face pale, his gaze averted. I had hit the mark. I couldn't help but laugh. "Kevin, I brought him to provoke you on purpose." Oliver's eyes widened in surprise. Then I continued, "Because I initially thought you just didn't understand the boundaries of male and female relationships, and I wanted you to learn from experience. But I was wrong. You weren't unaware. You just enjoyed it." I shoved him hard, and Oliver, unprepared, fell to the ground. I ignored him. "Oliver, let's get a divorce, or I'll despise you even more." Oliver refused to agree to the divorce, and even brought in my parents to try to persuade me. He had always made a good impression on them, well-educated, handsome, from a respected family, and a successful entrepreneur. When we married, he had shown great sincerity. My parents were swayed and tried to convince me to stay, But the tide turned after a few days because Oliver's reputation took a nosedive. Someone had recorded the bar incident and posted it online. Soon, the entire internet was talking about how Simona had sat on a married man's lap, fed him alcohol mouth to mouth, and got slapped by his wife. Public opinion overwhelmingly condemned Simona and Oliver. Disgusting. She knew he was married and still did that. She'd go after anyone, married or not. Didn't you see her bra on another guy's neck? Gross. Both of them. At first, Simona tried to argue with netizens, claiming that her relationship with Oliver was just pure childhood friendship. But the internet wasn't having it. They started digging into her life, uncovering how she wore Oliver's clothes, slept in his bed, drank from the same glass, shared ice cream, and held hands. The worst was when she snuck into a male bathhouse wrapped in a towel to soak with her brothers. She documented all of this with pride in her daily posts. Simona became notorious. Oliver became notorious. Their entire childhood friend group became notorious. Those who had girlfriends were dumped, and the singles had no chance of finding someone new. The group was even mockingly dubbed Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs Online, a term that became synonymous with them. Watching this unfold, I felt a grim satisfaction. Simona had been a cancer in my relationship with Oliver, growing uncontrollably. I had tried to remove it, but Oliver never cared. Now that cancer had backfired on him, but I was already detached. After a few days, the furor died down. Oliver's friends were all wealthy and influential, and overnight, all negative comments were wiped clean. Simona's social media accounts were completely erased. A few days later, Oliver's parents visited me, begging me to see him. He had drunk himself sick, vomiting blood, and was in a deep coma by the time they found him and rushed him to the hospital. On the hospital bed, he kept murmuring my name. "I know Ollie made a mistake, but for the sake of your marriage, please go see him, Rita. Please," his parents pleaded. I went to the hospital. Oliver had lost a lot of weight. The loose hospital gown hung on him, empty and forlorn. His face was pale, almost translucent. Only when he saw me did a spark of life return to his expression. I walked over, stopping his attempt to sit up. "When will you be discharged?" I asked. Oliver's eyes brightened, and he struggled to speak. "Next week. Rita, does this mean you're willing to forgive me? I promise if you give me another chance, I'll never make the same mistake again. I'll keep my distance from Simona. When you're discharged, we'll file for divorce," I said, shattering his hope. Watching Oliver's face contort in pain, sweat beading on his forehead and sliding down his face, his voice was rough as he pleaded. "Rita, I didn't cheat, you know that. It was all just fooling around. I promise I'll keep my distance from them if you don't like it. Rita, I beg you, don't leave me." Seeing I was unmoved, Oliver fell out of the bed, kneeling in front of me. He knocked over the IV stand, scattering everything on the floor, the needle twisting and cutting his hand, causing blood to splatter on the tiles. It was a pitiful, tragic sight. Oliver, who had always been proud and confident, was now reduced to this desperate, broken man, begging on his knees. I should have felt something, sympathy, pity, perhaps even the lingering remnants of love. But I felt nothing. I simply looked down at him, unmoved, and shook my head. "No," I said firmly. My cold response seemed to hurt Oliver more than any physical pain. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief, anguish, and desperation. "Why?" he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Why can't you let it go? It was Simona who pursued us. I didn't push her away, but I didn't do anything to betray you. Why can't you just let it go?" His words cut through the silence like a knife, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of something. Perhaps it was the final remnants of the bond we once shared, but it was fleeting. And I quickly reminded myself of everything that had happened. "Because it's not just about what you did or didn't do," I replied, my tone steady and firm. "It's about the fact that you enjoyed the attention, that you let it happen, that you didn't care enough about our relationship to set boundaries. I can't trust you anymore, Oliver." My words seemed to crush him. His face drained of color and he slumped to the floor defeated. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry." But it was too late for apologies. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. I stepped around him, careful not to step in the blood, and walked out of the room. The sound of Oliver's sobs echoed in the hallway as I left, but I didn't look back. In the days that followed, Oliver's parents continued to plead with me to reconsider. They even offered to put everything, house, car, company, in my name if I would just give Oliver another chance. My own parents, upon learning I was pregnant, hesitated as well, thinking of the future and the life growing inside me. But I remained steadfast in my decision. Oliver, too, seemed to accept the inevitable. He agreed to the divorce, and we completed all the paperwork. The 1-month cooling-off period passed quickly, and soon we were standing outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, our marriage officially over. As we walked out, Oliver looked like a man on the verge of breaking down completely. He pleaded with me one last time, asking for another chance, telling me he loved me, that he wanted to atone for his mistakes. But I had nothing left to give him. I shook my head and turned to leave, not noticing the red BMW speeding towards us until it was too late. Bang! The sound of the impact was deafening. Time seemed to slow down as I watched Oliver get hit and thrown into the air. It was like a scene from a movie. Everything moving in slow motion. The last thing he said to me before he was thrown was, "I'm sorry." In that moment, my heart stopped. Everything around me faded into the background as I rushed towards him. But before I could reach him, Simona burst out of the passenger seat of the car, screaming hysterically when she saw that it was Oliver who had been hit. She turned on me with a wild look in her eyes, screaming for my death, and lunged at me with a knife. But before she could reach me, patrolling police officers tackled her to the ground, disarming her and pinning her to the hood of the car. Simona screamed and struggled, her voice filled with rage and madness. "Rita, why don't you die? If it weren't for you, they wouldn't have all distanced themselves from me. It's all because of you, you bitch! I'll kill you!" She shrieked, her voice raw and frenzied. It was then that I learned what had driven her to this point. After the bar incident, Oliver's parents and their childhood friends had decided to cut ties with Simona, blaming her for everything that had happened. She had become the scapegoat, the one they sacrificed to preserve their own reputations. The Jiang family, pressured by the backlash, sent Simona abroad, forbidding her from ever returning. The young men who once treated her as their mascot abandoned her as soon as their own interests were threatened. For Simona, it was the ultimate betrayal, and she blamed me for it all. But I didn't feel anger or fear, just a deep, profound sense of absurdity. Simona's madness, her misplaced hatred, and the tragic consequences of it all, it was all so far removed from the life I once knew. I stood there, watching as the police dragged her away, her screams fading into the distance. Oliver survived the accident, but the impact left him paralyzed from the waist down. Simona was convicted of intentional injury and sentenced to life imprisonment. In prison, she was attacked and disfigured, though the reasons behind it remained unclear. After the accident, many people came to see me. Oliver's parents, his friends, my own parents, all urging me to stay by his side, not to abandon him in his time of need. They reminded me of the years we had spent together, of the fact that Oliver had saved my life by pushing me out of the way of the car. But despite their pleas, I knew I couldn't stay. I visited Oliver in the hospital one last time. The once proud man now lay in bed, unable to care for himself, his spirit broken. When he saw me, his eyes filled with regret. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You saved my life, and for that, I'm grateful." But when Oliver, his voice choked with emotion, asked if I was willing to stay, I shook my head. "I'm going home," I told him. "You know I'm an only child. If it weren't for you, I would have returned home after graduation to start my career. Now it's time for me to live my own life." My words seemed to drain the last bit of hope from him. His face darkened, his eyes filled with pain. "I knew it," he muttered bitterly. "A cripple like me is meant to rot in the mud for the rest of my life." "Oliver, we each have our own lives to live. You can no longer influence mine, and I shouldn't influence yours," I said firmly, cutting through his self-pity. The room fell silent as sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm, golden glow on me. I returned to my hometown, leaving the memories and pain behind. Over the next 2 years, I occasionally heard news about Oliver. He eventually regained the ability to walk, though his illness had caused the collapse of his company. Life moved on, and I focused on rebuilding mine. Another New Year's Eve came, and as I helped my parents make dumplings, I received a message from Kevin. "Happy New Year," it read. Attached was a selfie of him sitting alone on a balcony. I smiled and teased, "Spending New Year's alone again? If you can't stand it, come to my parents' place. They'll take you in for a few days." Kevin quickly replied, "No, my partner wouldn't be happy." He was referring to his long-deceased first love, the one he had never truly moved on from. I raised an eyebrow and typed back, "Impressive, maintaining such gentlemanly conduct all these years." "Of course, friends also need boundaries," he replied. I chuckled to myself and looked out the window. Snow was falling gently, covering everything in a soft, white blanket. The world was quiet, peaceful. It was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh. And as I stood there, watching the snow fall, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had made it through the storm, and now it was time to embrace the peace that followed. The snow continued to fall as I stood by the window, reflecting on everything that had happened. It was hard to believe how much my life had changed in such a short span of time. From the intense emotional turmoil with Oliver to the quiet solace I found in my hometown, it felt like I had lived several lives within the past few years. But now, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally where I needed to be. As the days passed, I settled into a new routine. My parents were supportive, giving me the space I needed to heal while also keeping me grounded in the familiarity of home. The simplicity of life here was comforting, helping out in the family business, reconnecting with old friends, and taking long walks through the snowy countryside. There were no more games, no more lies, just the peace of living honestly. Kevin and I continued to keep in touch. He would check in on me regularly, always with a lighthearted joke or a story to share. He never pried too much into my past, understanding that I needed time and space to sort through my emotions. Our friendship was a steady anchor, one that I could rely on without fear of judgment or expectation. One day, while I was organizing some old photographs, I came across an envelope tucked away in a drawer. It was from Oliver. It must have been sent shortly after the divorce, though I had never opened it. For a moment, I debated whether or not to read it. Part of me wanted to leave the past behind completely, but another part felt that maybe there was something in there that I needed to see. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Oliver's, neat, precise, almost too perfect, as if he had agonized over every word. "Rita, if you're reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to let you go. I know I've hurt you in ways that can't be undone, and for that, I'm truly sorry. When I look back at our time together, I see so many moments where I failed you, where I chose pride or habit over love and respect. I let myself be blinded by my own insecurities, by my inability to understand what it really meant to be a husband and a partner. I know it's too late to make things right between us, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. You were right to leave me, and I hope that by now, you found the peace and happiness that I couldn't give you. If there's one thing I regret more than anything, it's not valuing the love we had until it was gone. I took you for granted, and in doing so, I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I didn't show it. I wish you all the best in life, Rita. You deserve so much more than I could ever give. I hope one day you'll find someone who can give you the love and respect you truly deserve. Goodbye, Oliver." I sat there for a long time staring at the letter. It was bittersweet, reading Oliver's words. There was no satisfaction in his regrets, no pleasure in his pain. It was simply a closure, a final chapter to a book that had been filled with so much hurt. And as I folded the letter back into the envelope, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over, truly over, and now I could finally move on. Months turned into years, and life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. I found new passions, made new friends, and slowly I began to open my heart again. It wasn't easy, but with time, I learned to trust and love again, though I did so cautiously, with the lessons of my past always in mind. Kevin remained a close friend throughout it all, and while our relationship never crossed the line into romance, there was an unspoken understanding between us. He was the one person who had been there for me through everything, offering support without asking for anything in return. In many ways, he was the steady presence I had always needed, and I was grateful for him every day. One summer, Kevin invited me to a small gathering at his place, a modest, cozy home not far from mine. It was just a few close friends, sharing stories and laughter under the warm evening sky. As the night wore on, we found ourselves alone on the porch, the others having retreated inside. "Rita," Kevin began, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately." "About what?" I asked, curious. "About us," he said, meeting my gaze. "I know we've both been through a lot, and I've always respected your boundaries, but I also want you to know that if you ever feel ready, I'd like to be more than just your friend." His words hung in the air between us, and I could feel my heart beating faster. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about it. I had many times, but I had always pushed the thought away, afraid of risking the one stable relationship I had. "I don't want to pressure you," Kevin continued quickly, sensing my hesitation. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. I care about you, Rita, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. But I also understand if you're not ready for that." I looked at him, at the man who had been my rock for so long, and I realized something. I was ready. It had taken time, years of healing, of learning to trust myself again, but I was finally ready to open my heart, and I couldn't think of anyone better to share it with. "Kevin," I said softly, "I think I'm ready too." The smile that spread across his face was one of pure joy. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. We didn't need to rush anything. We had all the time in the world to explore this new chapter of our relationship, but as I leaned in to kiss him for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As the years continued to pass, Kevin and I built a life together. It wasn't a life without challenges, but it was a life filled with love, respect, and mutual understanding. We learned from each other, grew together, and supported one another in ways that I had never experienced before. Looking back now, I can see how everything that happened, both the pain and the joy, led me to where I am today. I am grateful for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the people who walked with me along the way. And as I stand by the window, watching the snow fall once again, I smile, knowing that I am finally at peace. The past is behind me, and the future is bright. I am loved, I am happy, and most importantly, I am free.